Good evening and welcome to Community Homeworks class on hand tools. Tonight we'll be discussing the basic hand tools you need to have in your toolbox to be able to do many of the repairs that you can do yourself in your home. My name is Jean and I work here in the education area at Community Homeworks, and we're so glad you joined us. If you have any questions during this presentation, please feel free to put them on the screen and we will answer them. If you have a question when you're watching later, please email them to the address that is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. And as always, I'd like to remind you that we are a nonprofit and certainly do appreciate any kind of a donation you can make to support our education program. Tonight, our presenter is Lee Taylor. He's with Habitat for Humanity and works with us to present our wonderful classes. We welcome everyone this evening and hope you have a good time and learn lots of things about hand tools. You ready, Lee? He's getting another screwdriver. Hang on half a second.
Yeah,
and he's back.
All right. Again, thanks for tuning in. I apologize. It's been a minute since I've taught this particular class. Like Dean said, if you have questions while we're going through this, just type them in. If it gets relayed to me, I'll be able to answer it. Again, this class is really just you're just starting to set up some basic hand tools. So you just got into a situation where you may need some things like that. And this also is going to cover what is needed as far as the basics for our habitat partners. I want to start out with saying that as far as hand tools go, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of hand tools out there in the world. Basically, it's similar to power tools. If there's a need, it's probably been made. Hand tools are one of those things that, by themselves really aren't that much, but add them up and they can cost quite a bit. So, taking care of them and whatnot. And part of what we're going to be talking about tonight also is sometimes hand tools, it can depend on where you get them. Sometimes not the cheapest thing is not necessarily the best. And we'll get into some of those details. And it can actually be a safety hazard. We'll talk about that also. I'm going to start with hammers. There are a lot of different hammers out there in the world. I'm going to start out with the size. And when I say size, there are two different things when I'm talking about size. One is the weight of the hammer. This one's a little bit dinged up. I don't know if you can see that on there, and you probably have to zoom way in, but this says 16 ounce. You can see it. So this is a 16-ounce hammer. It's talking about the head weight. This one, it's a 19-ounce hammer. This one is, I don't even know, not much. So there's a weight difference, all right? So that's one of the differences. One of the other differences is the head style, or the claw style. So you have what is called a curved claw, and this is where this is used for pulling nails and whatnot. This curved claw bends down like this. And we're just looking at the head now, versus what's called a rip claw or a straight. Sometimes people call it a straight claw. This is actually tilted up, and you can see the differences between the two. If you have to pick a straight claw hammer. You can get a straight claw in any weight, but the straight claw is just a lot better. It turns that hammer into a much more useful hand tool. So that's one of the first things, is the weight and then the style of the claw. The second thing is the handle. So the handle can be, start out with a good old traditional. Well, this is a 13-ounce hammer. You can have standard wood handle. And that, like I said, all different styles and everything else. You can have, and there are larger versions of this just because it's a small, so I'm just showing the handle style. This is a hollow metal tube with a rubber grip slipped onto it and it's compressed into the head. I don't like these. I'll explain why. And then you have the fiberglass handles. And those are a fiberglass body and with a rubber style grip. And the head is held on by a two-part epoxy that this handle's pushed up in there, and then that two-part epoxy is poured in. Versus like a wooden handle. The wooden handle's pushed up in there, and then you have metal wedges that spread out this wood to bite onto the head of the hammer. So they said basically three different styles. There are 4 different styles. There is a style of hammer that the head and the handle are all made out of metal, one piece of metal. It's almost kind of like they dip the whole thing, or forge the whole thing, and then just put some kind of a grip on there. Generally, I'm going to say if this is kind of your basic hand tool, and you're not really going to be framing, and you're not really going to be, getting into too much, I would get a fiberglass style handle with a rip claw. This is a curved claw, and the curves can be different. You can see there's differences even in these curves. But that rip claw, this curve would be straight out from the head. I'd get a 16-ounce fiberglass rip claw hammer. 16 ounce is going to get you coverage for just about anything you're doing. You can do light framing with it. I wouldn't frame a whole house with it. The fiberglass is more durable. And when I'm talking about that, when you're hammering and you're striking something, a lot of times you have what's called a misstrike, and whatever you're hitting hits this part. On a wood handle, that can potentially crack it. On a hammer like this, that's a hollow metal tube, it can actually start to bend it. I'm going to show you how this looks. You can see how this hammer is coming up like this, and it's not a 90 degree, it's actually pitched. I don't know if you can tell with that on there. But this one's bent, and we're going to get into that. We can even use a good old speed square to show you that. I can go like this, and this thing's really kicked down. Well, I don't like these hollow metal hammers. They do have a tendency to break. The other issue with these is that because that handle, that grip is glued on, I've seen it many times where somebody goes back like this and the hammer goes flying and they're left just holding the rubber grip. So don't like that style necessarily. The fiberglass, like I said, is going to be a little more durable. It's a little lighter weight. It does have, all hammers will have potential bells and whistles on them, I call. One of the things that is nice, and I'll show you on this framing hammer, is there's a little slot right here. And what that's designed for is to hold a nail. And you can put whatever size nail, well, pretty much whatever size nail in there, and that magnet will hold it. And then I can reach out and stick that in. It'll give me a little bit more reach. It'll stick into whatever it is that I'm hammering, and then I can go ahead and hammer it out instead of trying to hold it and stretch out and stuff. There are hammers that size that have that little feature on it. So that's nice. I mean, it doesn't really add to the cost or anything like that. The other thing is you got to look for is you have a difference in heads. This is what's called a waffle head. This is for framing. And the reason that this is mainly specifically for framing is if I'm hitting a nail and I'm not going straight down on that nail, let's say I'm going off at an angle this way, that waffle head will grab that nail head and drive it in. And it just helps grab. So, I mean, a lot of times, especially if you're framing, you may be off at a weird angle, you may be stretched way out. That waffle head, some people call it a framing head, will grab that nail and make it so it digs in and bites that nail a little bit better and helps drive it. But on fine surfaces, if you're doing trim or you're doing anything else like that, the issue is that if you hit it, you're going to leave a good old dimple. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it leaves an actual mark, and that's not good. So like I said, framing hammers, or if you're going to be swinging a hammer all day, doing rough framing and stuff. But because I've seen that head style on these hammers themselves. So the other issue is with hammers is you want to, I don't like buying the most inexpensive hammer. And the reason for that is it's not so much the head of the hammer, it's the claw of the hammer. So these claws are designed to be able to pry nails out, pry a lot of different things out. The more you use them, the more you find out you can use. The issue is that if the hammer itself is inexpensive or cheap, the metal is often cheap. And I have seen it where somebody is up on a ladder and they hook on and they're prying something, and all of a sudden that metal, because it's a inferior metal, just breaks. And I've seen people fall off a ladder not because they were off balance, not because the ladder wasn't set up right, all that. It was just because the hammerhead broke. So usually I'm going to say try to stick with either a name brand if you're buying a new hammer from a store. And I say name brand, I'm talking Plum, I'm talking, boy, I haven't taught this class in a real long time. I can't think of hammer names right now, but if you talk to them, I mean, you just don't want some really off brand, because like I said, usually the price is going to show that is, that metal has the potential to be weak. The other thing is that if, let's say you're buying a hammer from a garage sale, okay, fine. With the fiberglass ones, if you find a fiberglass handle and the head is everything you want, the weight is how it feels, the hammer feels good in your hands, that's the other thing. You check it, so you want to make sure that it hasn't bent. A fiberglass one's not going to really bend, versus a metal one like this, how it's bent. So you want to make sure the head is not bent down this way. It should be a 90 degree from the handle. The other is that the handle is actually attached to the head. And the easiest way to be able to tell that is you grab the head, or the head of the hammer, and if it's wiggling on that handle, like this guy, and you can hear it, I can move it around, that's not good. This has this is a wooden handle, so it has those little metal pieces, the wedges that we were talking about, and it looks like some epoxy was put in over the top, but that epoxy is broken out, and now that head is loose, and that becomes a dangerous hammer. Not that it's not usable anymore, but that's something, unless you want to replace that wooden handle, that you would probably want to avoid. The other thing on wooden handles is, let's say the handle and the head are on fine, the head's not bent, all that sort of stuff. We were talking about misstrikes. Sometimes when something gets hit, you'll see this has dents here and there. It's going to get hit right in this area. Sometimes it'll crack it, or a chunk will be out of it. And at that point, it becomes a dangerous hammer, because, you get a lot of force when you're hitting that. And I've seen it where somebody goes like this and the head comes flying back and it whacks them right in the face. So that's the nice thing about the wooden handled ones, is that you can buy new handles for them and put them on. So, I kind of like some of the older hammers and older tools in ways, because the metal back then was not cheap metal. It just was a better quality metal. So the weight on the hammers, like the reason I said a 16 ounce is, like I said, that's generally going to do what you need it to do. Everybody always has an issue. It seems like when they're learning to hammer that they're bending the nail or something along that line. The heavier the hammer, the less strokes or the less hits you have to do to be able to drive that nail to what you drive that nail in. It's when you have a really light hammer. I'm gonna pick on this guy. When you have a really light hammer, even if you're swinging it, it's going to take multiple hits. And the problem is every time the nail's hitting it weakens it up a little bit and it wants to and bend over. So as I said, generally a 16 ounce is going to get you the momentum that you need to be able to drive that nail and be able to make it so it doesn't bend and drive you crazy trying to straighten it back up. We're going to get into more, like I said, the hand tools too. We get into a little bit more on some tricks and whatnot with hammers. But like I said, that's the basics on the hammers. And when I was talking about metal, that type of issue that I'm having with the metal is relevant on some other tools. So if I say, hey, metal's the same issue on this, that's kind of what I'm talking about, the potential of it being brittle, that sort of thing. So a hammer is one of the basics that you want. The other thing you want is a decent set of screwdrivers. And what I mean by that is, and I forgot to grab one. What I mean by that is a variety of them. And there's reasons why you want different lengths and whatnot. So you have, this is what's called a 6-in-1. And the reason they call it that is you have your two sizes of Phillips. This is the cross. You have number 1, it's real small. Number 2, number 3 is an actual large size, but 6-in-1s generally don't have that. So you have your two sizes, number 1, number 2 of your Phillips. And you have the two sizes, number 1, number 2 of your flat blade. With the flat blade, you're talking really just width of it, So there's your 4 right there. And they're interchangeable by just pulling these out. Let's say you need, let's say I have this set up and I'm using a number 2 and I come across where I need a number, I did it wrong. When I come across where I need a number 1 Phillips, I can flip that around, and now I have a number 1 Phillips on there. And these tips, a lot of times you should be able to buy them. That's a different story, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So that's your 4. So you say, okay, well, that's 4. Well, what about 6? This is a driver. What I mean by that is that you can also drive hex nuts. There's that size, and then there's that size. So I can flip this around and be able to drive a nut drive or something like that, or some kind of a driver, and I have 2 different sizes. They do have 8-in-1s, and for the life of me, I always forget what the other 2 on the 8-in-1s, but anyways. 6-in-1 generally is going to get you just about anything you want. I would say the only thing you really don't want to do with one of these, and I see people do it all the time, is for whatever reason, they decide that they're going to turn it into a chisel or something and they're hitting with it. If you do that, you're going to drive this thing deep inside and you're never going to be able to pull it out again. So treat them nice. But a 6-in-1 is really handy. It's going to take up, you're going to be able to have, 4 or so screwdrivers with just 1. So always handy to have. Other is you're going to have a variety, and I'm getting these to show length. The heads, or the style of it, whether it's a flat blade or a screw or a Phillips, that is, I would say, generally most of the time it's Phillips, what you're going to need. But what I'm going to talk about is length. So I call these little stubbies. These are handy because sometimes you're going to get into a situation where you just can't get into an area if you had a long screwdriver or even something like this. So sometimes you need that really short screwdriver just to be able to get into that area. So a stubby, I usually have a stubby flat blade. I think I've seen stubby 6-in-1s floating around. Those are real nice because, again, you might have whatever situation, and it does give you multiples spaces, multiple tools in one. So stubby to get into those tight spaces, and then a long-handled screwdriver to be able to get into areas that, you know, I mean, sometimes you have to reach down in and you just can't physically get one of these in. Or other situations, say like toilet repair or something, and let's say you have to tighten up that tank and you don't want to stuff your hand in that cold water, you can get a long screwdriver and stick it down in there and be able to do this and not get your hand all wet and cold. So having these long ones are nice. And like I said, there's varieties on all these, but the length is one of those things that you find that you end up needing. I mean, is it impossible to do it with one of these others? No, not necessarily. It's just about how easy is it going to be outside of the space. I can't get into a space because my screwdriver is too big than one of these guys. So different styles, different lengths are important to have.
Why is it called a 16-ounce hammer rather than a pound?
Just because it is. That's what they have on it. They always go by ounce. 16 ounce, 18 ounce, 23 ounce. There are some hammers that are really heavy. That is just why. I mean, they're just kind of been named that way for a long time. The other thing, you brought up a point that made me think of it. The other thing is that, you know, if you let's say you get a 16-ounce hammer and it's really heavy for you, drop down to the next smaller size, because if it's too heavy for you, you're not going to use it. So like I said, sometimes some people want to have a little bit smaller of a hammer. I would veer from getting the real short handled. They do sell hammers where your handle is only, say, this short. That's not a good thing. And we'll get into that next class, but we'll get into why. But don't get the short-handled hammers; they're about worthless. Hopefully that answered your question. If it didn't, bounce it back off me. So pliers. So a lot of different pliers out there. And again, you're gonna, you know, when we talk in different classes, we're gonna talk about, you know, get this plier, get that plier. I'm going to say that probably the two most used, possibly three most used in this whole bunch are going to be what are called slip joint pliers. This is where, you know, I'm doing, I need to get around something that's much bigger. I need to be able to adjust it. So this is where they call those slip joint pliers. Some people call these channel locks. Fine. Most people understand what those are. That's actually a brand name, kind of like the whole Kleenex thing. So slip joint pliers, they come in different sizes. You know, this is the most common. The longer it is, the more leverage you have. Also, usually the longer it is, the bigger it'll open up. This one here is going to only open up to that's about an inch. I'm going to say 1 3/4 inches at max, right? As far as biting down, I can always open it up, but as far as full on like this, that's about as big of a thing that it's going to be able to do. The other issue is that you can't try to get something too large with these because your hands aren't going to reach. They're not necessarily set up to be two-handed. They're set up to be able to have one hand on it. So sometimes that dictates the size you get, because if you have small hands like me, it's tough to get around those. So, but a size like this, a lot of times these are denoted by a number. I have one that are, I think they're called 420s or whatever. Those suckers are like this long, right? So generally, I'm going to say 2 of these. And the reason for that is a lot of times you're hooking onto something and you need something else to be able to hold it. So a lot of times I end up with 2 of these things and I'm working with them together. But slip joint pliers, this size is fine. This size is actually, you know, roughly 11 inches or so. And that's about the normal size. Again, you'll see some that are really monstrous. You don't need ones like that. So one like this or 2 is nice. Metal does not necessarily pertain to this. There is one little thing though, and I'm going to talk about this. This is with any pliers. So if you are tightening something down, you're going to have that whole righty tighty, lefty loosey law for the most part, right? So let's say I'm tightening down my fingers and I'm turning this way, right? What's happening is I'm putting all blade pressure onto this point. And this is, they always say, put your pressure on the fixed point. Well, this is the most fixed point there is. This side moves. So if you're tightening something, you're holding it like this, you know, and as I'm turning, all that pressure is going to here. Let's say I want to loosen something up. Then I flip it around, and now I'm going counterclockwise or lefty, and I'm putting the pressure here. So when they say putting your pressure on a fixed point, that's kind of what they're talking about. And I'll show you the other variants with those. So that's with slip joint pliers. The other are adjustable pliers. These, again, you know, it depends on how wide, but you know, one like this, it's going to open up about that wide, which is about 1.5 inches, close to 1.5 inches, is going to be fine. Fixed point on this is the part that does not move. As I tighten this down, this closes up. That's my fixed point. So again, if I'm tightening something up, I'm holding it like this with a fixed point facing up, pulling it towards me. If I'm loosening something, I'm going to flip it, go counterclockwise, fixed point is towards me. So adjustable pliers, a couple of different sizes. Usually this size, and I like this size. The reason for this one, small ones, you're going to get into tight areas. You know, toilets are one of those areas where you're trying to snug down that bolt or something like that, and you may be able to just get it in there, and you may have a wall or something real close to it where something like this won't work, versus a small guy like this will work. So I like a smaller one and then a mid-size one. You don't need a giant one for your basics. So adjustable pliers. Needle nose, and again, needle nose all over the place. I like my needle nose. These are a little small, but again, depending on your hand size and stuff, something like that is going to work out just fine. You could even get crazy ones like this, along with a hook. Cool. They even sell ones like this. It's super long. You don't need one like this. I'm just showing this as an example. They have all different styles out there. But needle nose pliers are one of those things where I always find myself using this more just to get down into a point and grabbing something and maybe turning it or something along that line. The other nice thing is it has a pair of cutters right on the side here to cut wire or cut whatever. So that's what that is. That cutter is built into that. So needle nose pliers, whatever size. The funny part is that this is what most people think of when they think of pliers. And to be honest with you, the more I work with stuff, the less I use these. Usually these are going to be you're gonna use one of these others generally before you're gonna use one of these. But your standard plier, it's made to be able to A, grab things, B, this rounded out areas to be able to go around a bolt head or something like that to be able to grab it. If the bolt head's bigger, I can slip it open to where I can make that a much bigger area. So just your standard pliers. The metal doesn't necessarily apply with these. Because they're not necessarily a striking tool. or a prying tool. So pliers, all types. One that's not in here, but I'm gonna throw this one out there. These are called side cutters. They are strictly a cutting tool, you know, for the most part. These are nice. What I like these for is sometimes, especially if you get a nice one as a hardened metal, I can grab something. Let's say I have a nail head that has the nail head's popped off. Now I have just a nail with no head on it. I can get one of these, especially if I have a little longer handled one, have a little more leverage. I can grab that nail, bite into it. I'm not closing it all the way, but I can roll that up a little bit and give it a little bit of a curve and then take it off. Now I got the nail head sticking up like this. And that gives me enough to be able to get my hammer underneath it and be able to pull it out. Side cutters, you know, these are one of these tools that the more you, if you have them, the more you use them, the more you realize how handy they really are. So side cutters are a really nice thing. So I'll add that to kind of the pliers and stuff. One of your others basics is safety glasses. We went over that already and went over other classes. Gloves, and we went over that also. When power tools, as far as a jersey glove or a leather glove, something like that. Hearing protection, we also went over that. And you can have that in your toolbox also. Different types of hearing protection that we went over already. Dust masks. I don't like putting dust masks in toolboxes just because they get squashed. But hey, it's good to have them. Some of this stuff doesn't make sense, but this is for our habitat people. Safety boots, that sort of thing. You know, safety boot is going to be one that, let's see if I can get my boot up here, is full coverage, heavy, usually leather. This is a composite toe, so I can drop something on that. I can step on a nail. It's not going to puncture through, that sort of thing. But they're a work boot, you know, so some kind of a protection for your feet. You wouldn't believe how often you tear your feet up out there. So some kind of a good working shoe. Doesn't have to be super expensive. And they actually now have some really neat, almost look like tennis shoes, but they have a safety toe and all that. And they have a shank in them, so you can stomp on a 16-penny nail and not put a nail through your foot. So the other is, I'll get into it just because I'll forget if I don't. You're going to start getting all these tools, and a lot of times what people have a tendency to do is buy a toolbox first. Don't do that. Get your tools rounded up. Then figure out what toolbox you need. And the reason is that they're all different lengths. I mean, you know, some people say, I don't need a hammer like this, but I want a hammer like this. Fine. And, you know, let's say they go out and they get a really short toolbox. And they think they're going to fit all their tools in it. Not the case. Generally, I'm going to have, you know, a couple of toolboxes. And usually you start out with just one, and then you learn real fast that you don't have enough room in that toolbox to be able to carry it without ripping your arm off. So I get my tools rounded up, then I pick the toolboxes. A couple of different styles. You don't need fancy toolboxes, that sort of thing. Plastic is nothing wrong with plastic. I actually kind of like it. Doesn't rust, that sort of thing. The handles usually are in pretty good shape. The only thing with these plastic ones is that if you overload them, I've seen where these handles can break out. But a lot of times they're going to have a tray like this on the inside so that you can put smaller item tools in there and whatnot and be able to go in and reach in with whatever else that you want inside. The thing with the toolboxes, like I said, is think about how much weight you're going to be putting in them and the length of things you're going to be putting in them. And then kind of a side note on that would be if you're using, let's say, a metal toolbox like this guy over here is kind of way off to the side. there's nothing wrong with metal toolboxes. The only thing about them is that A, they can rust, and they can rust your tools. And that can be a bit annoying, especially if you're leaving them in, you know, kind of a humid area, that sort of thing. And they can also, they can scratch up surfaces pretty bad. So a lot of times those metal boxes, I don't know how many times it's happened where somebody's come into the metal toolbox and you just finished the floor and they go wham, and they slam their toolbox down and it leaves a big old gouge because it's a metal toolbox. So think about that sort of stuff as far as your toolboxes, but kind of match your tools to the box. Don't try to do it the other way around. And then, you know, like I said, it depends on the person, how much weight they can carry. I have a toolbox at home. It's like this long, it's like this tall and like this. If I were to fill that thing, it'd break my arm. I have one in my tool truck it stays there because I don't carry it around with me. But every time I pull it out, the thing's like 70 pounds. So you have to kind of think about how you're going to be using that toolbox. All right. We have about 20 minutes. All right. Tape measures. Tape measures are one of those things that we'll get into more details on these tape measures. With the tape measure, this is where buying a name brand or a store brand, ask them if they have a warranty on it. And a lot of times they do. And as long as that tape measure hasn't been mistreated, let's say it breaks for whatever reason, you can take it in, set it on the counter, and they'll look at it and they'll go, oh yeah, I can tell this really wasn't abused. Oh yeah, the tip broke off. Yeah, go grab one off the shelf, right? And that's the other thing to think about is that when you're buying hand tools, any hand tool, ask about that warranty. What kind of warranty does it have on it? And they say, oh, it has a lifetime warranty. Okay, fine. What does that entail? Does that mean that I have to, I have some places where I can go, it broke, they look at it, they say, go grab another one, I show it to them, and I walk out the door. That's a great warranty. Other ones, it's, oh, send it in, and then we'll look at it, and we'll have it for 3 or 4 or 6 weeks, and then we'll figure out if we're going to get you a new one. So ask questions about that warranty for any of the hand tools. And a lot of times, the bigger companies, they just don't want to go through that hassle. It's a lot easier for them to say, oh, yep, that was a failure. Grab another one, take off. So tape measures a lot of times have that warranty on it also. So what do you want to look for when you get a tape measure? Generally, first off, what you want to look at is the length. 25 foot, that's about right. As far as general use goes, don't get those really small ones, like a little 12 footer or something like that. And this is the reason. I'll back up. Let's say I'm here and I need to measure something. I want to be able to extend that out and say hook onto that rain barrel. And I want to say I am 8 feet away from that rain barrel. With those really narrow ones, you're never going to get it much past this. It's just going to fall. So like I said, 25 or so foot. And then this is what's called a standoff. Generally, they should stand off at least 7 foot before they break like that. Some of them you can play with around in the store. I've seen some where you can shoot it out to like 12 foot almost before it breaks. They're a bit expensive. 7 foot's about normal. It's about what you want. So 25 foot is a good length. The other is how it is broken up. So I call this a cheater one. You always have your inches, your half inch, quarter, eighth, right? With this one, you can see it's broken down 2 1/8, 2 1/4, 2 3/8, 2 1/2, 2 5/8, 2 3/4, 2 7/8. That's nice when it's broken down like that because you can actually see it. So that I say, if you're not used to reading the tape, get one that has one like that. You're going to have one that has real fine markings on this side. Generally, people, for the most part, don't go over 1/8 of an inch or finer than 1/8 of an inch. So some of this finer stuff you don't have to worry about. If you like metric, those are available, but that's always a pain to get it and find out, oh my gosh, I got a metric one. Oops. And you're not used to it. The other is another detail on this is sometimes on the back side, you have the same markings. And why is that important? Again, if you're doing something like this, you know, and you're going like this and it stretches around, and sometimes that tape bends a little bit, well, fine. I can read it off the back side or I can read it off the front side. This one does not have that, but that is a nice feature. If it has it, great. Sometimes they'll have magnets on the end. That's a nice little trick. If I'm doing something, I can go peek and hook it right to something like that. And I'm not trying to hold it. It frees up a hand in a sense. So a little magnet on the tip is one of those nice things. The other is the lock feature. So this lock feature makes it so that I can pull this out and lock this. Now, I do want to point out something. You should be able to, in that lock feature, you should be able to 2-finger grab it and pull it. If for some reason you put on that lock and no matter how hard you pull, it does not want to pull out, set that tape measure back up on the shelf. You don't want it. And the reason is what happens inside here is that you have two little things. And when I lock that, it pushes down onto the tape. They are meant to be gently holding it just so it doesn't retract. Some of them bite so hard where you can't do this if you wanted to, and it ends up kinking the metal, and that metal is going to fail in that spot. So that's a little trick with that lock feature is that, yes, fine, all of them have a lock, but you should just be able to pull it out with 2 fingers, no problem. But if it doesn't pull out, don't get it. It just turns into a mess. If you're buying a used one, you know, a lot of times what I'm going to look at, A, does it retract? You know, so I'm going to hold it like this and it should retract up all the way. Is the tip bent? A lot of times this gets dropped and this tip goes and it throws off your measurements significantly. So is this tip nice, a 90-degree angle? The other is, you know, how is that spring inside? There's a big spring inside that actually helps it retract. I listen to them, especially if it's an old one I'm getting at a garage sale. I'll do that. And I'll say, okay, it retracts, but I'll listen to it and see if I'm hearing grit or something like that. And the reason that is because people do this. Let's say they're outside and they want to measure something. They're going to lay it down like this, or even inside, doesn't matter. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's say there's dirt and sand all over, and they wind it up like this. Now that dirt and sand gets inside, it's just going to tear it up. That's why I said, God gave you tails from your shirt. And what you do is, if you take dirty or wet, you get your shirt, and you just do that, clean off the grit, clean off the water, that sort of thing, and make your tape measure last a lot longer. So, a couple of little basics on tape measures, and we'll get into, like I said, all this we're going to get into a little more detail on. Pencils, 10 minutes. Carpenter's pencil, why is it flat? So it doesn't roll away. Round pencil, number 2 pencil, little finer point. I can get in there and mark out what I need. And then a permanent marker, I don't have one here, but like a Sharpie or something along that line, because sometimes you're going to get into situations where you're not able to mark with a standard pencil. We talked about adjustable pliers or whatever. Allen wrenches are another one. I don't like the ones on the rings necessarily. I like these. It's just a little more useful. Get one that's standard, one that's metric. That's as simple as that. So, you know, a good set of Allen wrenches on both sizes, because I guarantee the minute you think you have it, it's going to be a metric or vice versa. So both sizes on your Allen wrenches. Open end wrenches, box wrenches, that sort of thing. Is that super necessary? Not really. You know, there's a couple of different styles. I mean, here's a kit here that has a little thing that holds it together, and I got a bunch of open end wrenches. You know, most of the time you can deal with, you know, you can use a pair of pliers or something like that for the most part. But this is one of those things that, you know, a couple of standard sizes, metric and standard size open end wrenches are nice. And again, depending on what you're getting into, good to have. Necessary, but good to have. Utility knife, that's a real important one. So utility knife, I have mine in my pocket. This one is a style that I can change the blade out very easily. This one folds up. There's nothing wrong with buying something like this because part of it is that I can change out that blade really quickly. I have a nice sharp blade. I'm less likely to hurt myself. And when I'm done with it, if you're not using it as a pocket knife, fine, you throw it in your toolbox, fold it up like that, takes up less room. Versus one of the other styles, because the other styles can be a pain. You got to open them up, unscrew something, and put a blade in and stuff, and it turns into a bit of a mess. Yes, they do have different styles and stuff, but a lot of times something like this is just as good, because if you're not throwing it in your toolbox, you can have it in your pocket and you're in good shape. So some kind of a utility knife blade. Flashlight, little simple LED flashlight, something along that line. Rugged, so it can bang around in your toolbox. That's always nice. So something along that line. Something that can get wet. You're going to be in a situation where you're going to get wet for sure. Some of the other basics, this is a little big, but these are, some people call them eyeglass kits. This is usually all they are. It's like a flat head and like a Phillips head, but they're really small. These are nice when you come across, let's say you're putting in like towel bars or something along that line, and you have a little set screw in there, and you have to set that in, and you just don't have too small of a screwdriver. That's where these come in handy. Very handy to have a little set like this. Most of the time, this part is not here, so you have just 4 or 5 Phillips, 4 or 5 flatheads, varying down to very small little areas so that you can actually get into some of those things. Speed square. Speed square is a triangle. Very handy. This tool is one of these tools. You could have a whole class just on this tool. For the most part, you have to look at it this way in the beginning. You can do a simple 90 degrees, so I can hook this on and draw my mark with my pencil. Let's say I'm hooking on like this. I know that this is a 90-degree angle. I can do a 45. That's a true 45. You can build a whole house with this, really. Simple speed square, pretty compact. It's not really gonna, get banged around too much. There is a lot you can do with this. But a simple speed square like this doesn't have to be metal, it can be plastic. There's nothing wrong with plastic. You can even use this with power tools. And we'll have to, I didn't get a chance to go over that in power tool class, but so speed square. The other is a level. So for your toolbox, this is what's called a torpedo level. This is about 12 inches long. This is fine. For the most part, if you're hanging a picture or something along that line, you can do a horizontal. That will give you level. You can do a vertical. That will give you plumb. I can do a 45. That's what this one is, off at an angle like this. When those bubbles right in the middle, I know that that's basically a 45-degree angle. So a little torpedo like this is nice. Little nice feature sometimes is they have magnets on the back side. So let's say I want to be able to click that something, a pipe or something like that, it'll stay. Sometimes they have a little V-notch on it. So if it's sitting on a round pipe, I can actually balance it on a round pipe, and it's not going to want to roll off. The other feature is this. You got a sight glass on the top, so I can set it down like this and look and see if I can, I'm not trying to bend over and look at it this way, so I can sight right down on it to be able to tell if something's level. So a little torpedo level like that, very nice to have. Putty knives, different style putty knives. We're cutting it close here. I like metal ones, and I like ones that have a little bit of flex to them like this. The reason for that is if you're using spackle or something like that, it's going to give you a much smoother finish. They're durable, Are they meant to be totally bent? No, but they have a little bit of flex in them. It's just a little bit more usable, I guess. Don't think these are chisels. I don't know how many people going like this and getting a hammer and beating on it, and then all of a sudden you got these check marks out of them, and now you're putty knife was not doing what you needed to do. But like wall repair, that sort of stuff, these are nice. All different lengths or all different widths, but generally a 2.5 is about right until you start getting into some of the other wall repair classes. They may talk about a little wider knives, but something about like that is good. A razor scraper, they have these all over the place. This just holds a straight edge razor. This is for cleaning glass or scraping something. You know, this one I can loosen up and boom, and that drops out. And then if you're storing it, some of them you can store them like this so that you don't reach into your toolbox and find that razor with your finger. That's always nice because you can't always count on the cover to actually cover it up. So a razor scraper, I like the plastic ones. Metal ones have a tendency to rust and seize up. And there's nothing more infuriating than trying to put a new blade in a metal one that just doesn't want to open up anymore because it's gotten crusty and seized up. So plastic are fine. There's nothing wrong with plastic. Nice, flat, easy to be able to work with. Duct tape, you can never go wrong with duct tape. Always have duct tape. WD-40, that is one of those things that you can have a little one like this or something like this. I'm not pushing WD-40, but some kind of a lubricant like that. A couple things with this. I like, if I have metal tools, and let's say I know I'm not going to be getting into them for a while, what I'll do is I'll spray a little WD-40 on a rag and do a light wipe on the metal part of my tools. Why do I do that? It helps them keep from rusting. The other little trick you can do is, this is not WD-40, is those little salt packets or those moisture packets you get in pill bottles and a lot of other things. You can throw those in your toolbox. That'll help absorb any extra moisture that may get in there for whatever reason and want to flash rush your tools. So, but WD-40 is one of those really nice things that will make it so that will protect a lot of things, that sort of stuff. Flat bar, here it is. Flat bars are one of these tools that, again, the more you use it, the more you're going to find out how handy it is. This is a prying tool. Yes, and this metal matters. I can pry this way. I can pry. I can hook onto something and pry this way. I can pry two pieces of wood apart. I can get in there and pry up this way. I can pull nails out. That's what this is for. I can hook onto a nail and pull it down and then pry that nail out, that little teardrop shape. This part here is designed to be able to cut through. Let's say you have two boards that are nailed together with a big heavy nail. I can get that little V-notch and put it right onto that nail, give it a couple of whacks with a hammer, it will cut right through that nail. So these flat bars are really nice. Do you need the giant ones that are like this long? Not really. One like this that is about a foot, 12 inches or so. Yeah, this is 12 inches long. It's about right. It says it right on there, and I just noticed that. That's going to be perfectly fine for what you need. But a flat bar is really handy. Nail sets. Nail sets basically are, I'm pushing on my time. Is that clock right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Nail sets basically are for sinking different things into wood. So nails or whatever. You have 3 different sizes. Big, medium, fine. I might have flipped those. But these are just for countersinking things in. They're handy. This is one of these tools you don't use that often, but when you need it, it's really nice. Metal counts on this one too because it's a striking tool. We'll talk about that more in the next class as far as mushrooming and stuff like that. So yeah, nail sets. And the nail sets may look like, they may just look like a piece of metal. Another one in here. Yeah, they may look like this. And there's nothing wrong with that either. That's just a different style nail set. So some kind of nail set. Caulk gun. We're going to be just about done. Caulk gun. Basically, I'm going to say this. you're getting one, get a dripless. And what I mean by dripless is that as you push it, this rod here, there's no release pressure off this point. Some of them have a thing where you have to press this to release that pressure for that plunger, where it's pushing in for that caulk or glue or whatever it is that you're using. Dripless does not have that. The only thing with dripless is, like I said, it's good for light caulks, that sort of stuff. If it's a heavy caulk, heavy glue, you may want one that has a little pressure release. But for the most part, these simple dripless ones are nice. They're not putting a ton of pressure on it. You can caulk something and then you can set it down and it's not going to be oozing caulk all over whatever it is that you set down on. So a dripless style caulk gun, you have a puncture. That's what this is. You puncture, you open up your caulk tube and you puncture the foil wrap inside so it doesn't dry out. Trick with that is just wipe it off afterwards. You wouldn't believe how many people puncture something that's all covered in goo and then they go like this and it fuses to the tool. They actually have a cutter. I have not found one yet that actually cuts decently. I always cut it with my utility knife, but that's what that's for, to be able to stick tip in and cut that tip off. But a simple dripless caulk gun is going to do very well. Socket set. We're like 1 minute over. Oh no. Socket set, if I can open it. Yeah. Oh, sure. This was just open, wasn't it? Do with this. Yeah, socket set. All you got to do is open it. There you go. Stubborn thing. So a simple socket set like this, really, this is going to do just about most everything you want. We talk about this in lawnmower repair class or lawnmower maintenance class. I'm sorry. Even a simple one like this is going to be very nice. And you can find these all times at garage sales and all that stuff. You don't need to go out and buy a gigantic set. But even a simple set like this is going to be able to do just about everything you need. I can't get into really how to use them today or tonight. That would be something that I'd like to see for the next time we have, what is it, next week?
2 weeks.
In 2 weeks. So yeah, you get 2 weeks. So if you have a hand tool that you want more information on, or you want a hand tool that you want information on that you've heard of, send Gene an email with a picture. That helps. Don't say the do-ma-higger that does this. Then if you can get a picture, that's really great. Because like I said, we'll get into a little bit more details of those specific hand tools. Like I said, this is just your basic, I want to start a toolbox because I've gotten to that point in my life where I think I want to be able to repair what I've got. And I've gone over. So thanks for watching. I don't know if Gene wants to say anything or not.
Thanks for watching. Join us next week for our Green Living series on lead. And in 2 weeks for more information about hand tools from Lee. And there again, as he said, if you have a tool and you don't know why you have it, send us a question or a picture preferably of that tool so I can pass it on to Lee. And next week he'll be going over, or 2 weeks from now, some other hand tools that you probably will want to add to your collection as time goes on. Again, thanks for watching. Tell your friends about this video. They can watch it on our Facebook page or on YouTube in the future. And I hope you enjoyed tonight's class. Thanks. Bye.